The rain fell in soft, persistent sheets, hushing the world into eerie stillness. I had just left my friend's house. It was late, definitely past midnight. The road stretched out before me in lonely silence. Narrow ribbons of asphalt flanked by empty fields and scattered homes. Streetlights were scarce, and the relentless drizzle muddied the windshield. I leaned forward slightly, squinting through the fogged glass, every nerve alive with caution. The silence of the hour felt heavier than usual, pressing down like a warning. My drive home was only 20 minutes, routine safe, or so I thought. About 5 minutes into the drive, I rolled slowly toward a red light. Across the intersection sat a blue car, partially edged out into the crossing. Its headlights were on, its engine running, but it wasn't moving. The light on their end was green. They should have gone, but the car just sat there. Frozen, I frowned. Was the driver asleep? Injured? I couldn't tell. The rain smeared my windows like melted ink and everything. Outside looked warped and strange as my light turned green. I cautiously crept forward, steering around them. Glancing sideways into the car, a shadow sat behind the wheel, motionless. The view was too distorted to make out a face. Moments later, as I continued, down the road the blue car jerked into motion and turned to follow me. It wasn't broken after all. My fingers clenched the steering wheel a little tighter. I told myself not to panic. It could be nothing, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, like they were hearing something my ears couldn't. The blue car kept a steady pace behind me, its headlights flaring bright in my rearview mirror. Too bright, too close, in weather like this. That kind of tailgating wasn't just rude, it was dangerous. Mind raced through possibilities. Coincidence, drunk driver, or something worse. Then a subtle ding echoed from my dashboard. A low tire pressure warning. At first I brushed it off, bad timing sure, but tire sensors glitch sometimes. Another glance at my mirror. Still, they're so close I could almost see the silhouette of their hands on the wheel. Then another warning. A new one, flat tire. My chest tightened. This wasn't coincidence. This was planned. I was just a few minutes from home, the neighborhood's entrance almost. Within reach, but the car began to wobble, sinking to the left like a wounded animal. The steering wheel shook in my hands. I was no longer driving, just struggling to stay on the road. The tire was done. I was practically riding on bare rims now. I had no choice. I pulled over. So did the blue car instantly. 3 doors flung open. 3 figures stepped into the rain. I froze. My instincts screamed to drive off anyway, but my car was barely mobile. I should have called someone, but the moment had swallowed me. Sat paralyzed, eyes locked on the side mirror, watching the men approach. The street was deserted. No headlights in either direction. I was completely alone. The men moved quickly. 2 on my side, 1 on the passenger. My heart thudded like a war drum, but my body felt slow underwater. Then came the shouting, and the gun. Open the door. The man screamed, brandishing the weapon like it was an extension of his rage. His voice was thunder, cracking through the rain. I lifted my trembling hands, showing him I wasn't a threat. My mind tried to calculate a way out, but there wasn't one. Another man appeared behind him, slamming something hard against the rear window. Glass shattered with a sharp, sickening crack, cold rain, and sharp fragments sprayed across the seats as a hand reached in, fumbling for the back door lock. The third man rushed to the other side, wrenching the opposite back door open. In a blur, a hand shot forward from behind me, stretching across the front seats and yanking open my door. Icy air hit me like a slap. I sat frozen, breath shallow, instincts scrambled. The gun was now inches from my head. I couldn't move. I didn't even think I blinked. He dragged me from the seat and hurled me to the ground. My body hit the soaked pavement with a sickening thud, but all I could think about was how cold the road felt. I lay face down, soaked cheek pressed to the rain-slick pavement. The world blurred into gray and black and cold. The gun dug into the back of my head, yet somehow I barely registered. My brain was retreating, distancing itself from the horror, unraveling second by second. I wasn't thinking about the weapon or the shouting or the hands pawing through my car. I wasn't even thinking about dying. I was thinking about the texture of the road beneath me, the smell of wet concrete, the way the water trickled past my face like a stream from another world. Then I heard the voices change, sharper, more urgent. One of them shouted something, and the weight on my back shifted. Suddenly, pain flashed like lightning as something struck the back of my head. My skull cracked against the pavement. My vision exploded in sparks, and sound seemed to fold in on itself. I didn't know if it was a fist or the gun. Didn't matter. I was just gone, but not unconscious. Not yet. Their footsteps retreated, fast, slapping through puddles. Car doors slammed. The engine roared to life. Then just Like that they were gone. Rain fell harder, now mixing with the blood at my temple. I rolled onto my side, dazed, broken but breathing. My limbs felt disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. My phone was gone. Of course it was. I was alone, wounded in the middle of a pitch-black roadside with no one coming and no help in sight. I forced myself up, staggering, toward my car on shaking legs. The rims had been shredded. The tires were done. I knew driving it like that would ruin them, but I didn't care. I just needed to get home. I just needed to move. I drove the remaining few minutes in silence, the car thudding and screeching beneath my metal, grinding against wet asphalt. My mind was somewhere far away, detached, floating, trying not to feel. When I got home, I finally called the police. The police arrived swiftly, their flashing lights cutting through the gloom like a lifeline. I stood in my doorway, wrapped in a blanket, clothes soaked, head throbbing. I gave my statement with a detached calm, each word feeling like it belonged to someone else's story. I told them everything: the blue car, the flat tire, the men, the gun, every piece as clear as the cuts on my skin. The investigation revealed one chilling detail at the intersection where I first saw the blue car. Tiny tire spikes had been planted, deliberately placed to cause slow deflation, designed not for instant blowouts, but to let a driver get far enough away before being forced to stop. A trap, a hunter's snare. I had driven over them. I had taken the bait. They said I was lucky to have only hit one, lucky to still be alive. But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like survival scraped from the edge of something much darker. In the days that followed, I found myself walking through the world like a ghost, there but hollow. Every quiet night felt like that one. Every car behind me a shadow waiting to pounce. Sleep became a stranger. I'd hear footsteps in the rain when there were none. See headlights in my dreams. I kept revisiting that moment. Why didn't I drive off sooner? Why didn't I call? Why didn't I fight? But I wasn't weak. I was just human. The detectives never found the men. No arrests, no leads. Their faces were never clearly seen. The blue car vanished like it had never existed. They said they'd keep the case open, but I knew it was already fading into a cold file. Another name in a sea of names, another. Crime left to rot in the shadows. But for me it was far from over, because even now when it rains late at night I slow down at that same intersection, and I wonder if someone else is waiting in the dark. Rain hammered against the windows like quiet warning knocks from the night itself. The world outside my townhouse was drenched in gray, thick with the kind of gloom that seeps under your skin and makes even the most familiar places feel suddenly haunted. I was 24 and had lived alone with my dog Bear in that cozy little home for nearly 2 years. It was my first place, mine completely, and for a time it felt safe, like peace had an address. That night was my day off. I sat slouched in my living room chair, mindlessly scrolling through my phone while Bear lay by the glass back door, his eyes fixed outside. The clock glowed 8 p.m, an hour before my usual bedtime. Then Bear let out a soft whine and padded over to me, nudging my knee gently, his signal. He needed to go out. I opened the door and let him into the fenced backyard, figuring he'd be fine in the light drizzle. But no more than 20 seconds passed before his yelp cut through the air. Sharp, terrified, I sprinted to the door just in time to see him bolting back, tail tucked between his legs, whimpering. My heart slammed against my ribs as I yanked the door open wider and leaned out, scanning the rain-drenched shadows for a threat, maybe a raccoon, a coyote. But the yard was empty, eerily. Still Bear was trembling. I pulled him into my arms and shut the door, locking it tight. The rain persisted, whispering against the roof and windows like a lullaby meant to lull the house into false comfort. Bear nestled on my lap, still shaking his ears twitching at every creak of the walls or gust of wind. I tried to focus on the dull light of the television, but his eyes kept darting first to the kitchen window, then the sliding glass door, then the narrow window above the sink, always watching, always alert. 45 minutes passed in creeping silence until Bear stiffened. His body went rigid, eyes fixed on the window behind me. A low growl rolled out from his chest, deep and unnatural for such a small dog. I turned, and there he was, just inches from the glass, a man. His face was pale and expressionless, features distorted by the rain-streaked window, but his intent was unmistakable. He wasn't looking in with curiosity or confusion. He was watching, waiting. I screamed and stumbled back the chair. Crashing behind me, Bear erupted into a frenzy of barking as the man darted out of sight, his form vanishing down the side of the house. I flew to the blinds and yanked them closed. Panic surging through every nerve, I raced from room to room, pulling down every curtain, locking every latch. My breathing came in short bursts, too shallow to calm me, too fast to ignore. I didn't recognize him. No one should have been there, and yet he'd been close enough to touch the glass. Eventually, the adrenaline dimmed to a simmer. Bear settled, but not entirely. His head still jerked at odd sounds, his ears twitching. I stayed downstairs for hours, waiting for signs of return, straining to hear through the storm, but nothing came around. 1 a.m. exhausted and hoping the worst had passed, I retreated upstairs. Bear followed close at my heels, tail low and steps tentative. I led him into my bedroom and locked the door, still shaken, but desperate for rest. As I slid under the blanket, the silence returned, too complete, too careful. Sleep found me hesitantly in fragments. And when I woke, it wasn't to an alarm or the patter of rain. It was to Bear. He stood at the door, ears up, posture tense, eyes fixed on the doorknob like it might twist any second. Then I heard it, the voice of a man, speaking softly downstairs, and then another answering him. Not whispers, not hushed urgency. These men were speaking in full volume, like they had every right to be there, like they didn't care who heard them. Their footsteps echoed slow and deliberate on the wood below me. I froze, terror threading through my chest like ice. My door was locked, but that offered little comfort now. They were inside. My heart pounded as I moved silently to Bear, lifting his trembling body into my arms. We slipped behind the bed, crouched low in the far corner of the room as if the walls themselves might shield us. I pressed my back into the cold drywall, trying not to make a sound. Every breath now a deliberate act. Then it stopped. The voices, the footsteps, everything. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound, like the house itself was holding its breath. I could feel them on the other side of the door, not moving, not speaking, just breathing. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver so softly I barely heard myself speak. I gave my address, pleaded for help. Every syllable felt like a scream. Bear began to growl again, softly, then louder, until his bark shattered the stillness. 2 sets of footsteps surged up the stairs. Panic overtook me as they approached, fast and deliberate. I could hear them muttering, words indistinct but cruel in tone. Then one of them spoke louder, standing just inches from my door. "Hey, we just want to talk, we're not here to hurt you." His voice was disturbingly calm. I shouted that I'd called the police, begged them to leave. Another voice, quieter, murmured, "We're here to help you." But there was no kindness in it, only mockery, cold and unfeeling. Silence returned. I could hear them breathing again. 2 beasts in the night, waiting for a moment of weakness, and then footsteps descending. But only one set. I strained my ears in the suffocating quiet. Only one had gone downstairs. The other, he could still be outside my door, waiting, watching. Maybe crouched, low face, twisted in anticipation. The uncertainty was worse than any sound. I could no longer hear breathing, but that didn't mean he was gone. Then faintly sirens, distant but approaching, a soft crescendo of hope rising through the night. I clutched Bear tighter, whispering reassurances, more for myself than for him. The sirens grew louder, closer, until red and blue lights flashed through the cracks in the curtains below. Suddenly movement. Heavy, rapid footsteps pounded across the first floor. A door slammed, then nothing. But the dread didn't leave. One man had fled, but had the other ever left at all? Moments later, firm knocks on my bedroom door. A deep voice, measured and professional. "This is the police." I hesitated. What if it wasn't? But when I cracked open the door, a uniformed officer stood, their flashlight in hand. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. I stumbled out, clutching Bear, whispering the details in a torrent. How there were 2 men, how only one had run, how I never heard the other leave. They searched the house, top to bottom. Nothing. No footprints upstairs. No hidden man in the closets or under the bed, just watery prints on the floor. And one window unlocked. I didn't even remember leaving it open, even after the officers cleared the house and assured me it was empty. Something in me refused to believe them. Logic said I was safe, but logic has no place in the dark. The image of that man, his pale face pressed against the rain-speckled glass, haunted the backs of my eyelids whenever I blinked. His expression hadn't been curious or lost. It had been intentional, as if he was studying something, deciding something. And the other one, the one I never saw, was worse. At least the first man I could name as real. The second had become a phantom in my mind, a whisper behind a door, a shadow. In a place I couldn't reach. He had never left, at least not in my memory. I moved out 3 months ago. I didn't even wait for my lease to end. The thought of sleeping in that bedroom again made my stomach turn. I packed everything I could in a single day, leaving behind a few things I once thought I'd keep forever. Things can be replaced, peace cannot. Now in a new apartment miles away. Bear still jumps at strange sounds, and so do I. We sleep with lights on. I double lock every window, check every closet twice before bed, and yet some nights I still wake up at 3 and Bear stands at the door staring silent. And in those moments I don't ask what he sees, because I'm afraid I already know. The rain fell with a hushed ferocity, wrapping the early morning in a veil of gray and drumming gently against the glass front of the convenience store. I had been on shift for just over an hour, still cloaked in the dull solitude of the 3 a.m. lull. The world was sleeping. My store stood alone, a faint oasis of flickering fluorescent light tucked inside a deserted shopping strip. Nothing moved outside but the mist, and even the wind felt hesitant. I leaned against the front of the building beneath, the overhang cigarette lit, watching the rain bounce off the pavement like tiny sparks. The air was thick with that wet winter smell, concrete and ozone, soupy and warm. Despite the season, working these morning shifts had become my quiet escape. Minimal. Customers' easy tasks and long stretches of stillness that asked little of me but to exist and stay awake. Then a car pulled into the lot. Headlights pierced the haze, crawling forward until the vehicle settled into a space across from the store. I crushed my cigarette underfoot and slipped inside, expecting the driver to follow. But they didn't. Minutes ticked by. No one came. Curiosity crept in, gentle but persistent. I peeked out. The car remained parked, headlights now off inside shadows. Stillness rain glazed the windshield, making it impossible to see whether anyone sat behind the wheel. A strange feeling slithered into my chest, a tremor, nothing more. But I swallowed. It told myself it was nothing and resumed my post behind the counter. And still the silence deepened. 30 minutes passed. The silence was now a living thing, pressing against my ears, coiling around my spine. I hadn't moved much, barely a footfall. Away from where I'd been standing when the car first arrived, I checked the clock again. Only an hour into the shift. It felt like time itself had slowed to match the sluggish drizzle outside. Deciding to break the monotony, I grabbed the trash cart and began my rounds. Each trash bin gave up its soggy contents into the black bags with a wet thunk. The routine was familiar grounding until I heard it, a sharp click, faint, almost distant, but deliberate. It could have been anything. A branch snapping, a lock giving way, the old building shifting with age. Still, it stirred something uneasy in my gut. I paused. Rain muffled everything, turning the world to static. I shook off the thought. Noise happens. With the trash collected, I wheeled the cart to the back door, unlocked it, and pushed into the deeper rain. It poured harder now, like the sky had grown angry in my brief absence. I hauled the bags into the dumpster and turned back toward the door. That's when I noticed it. Something was different. The store directly connected to Minnie's back door was cracked open. That door was always locked, always dark, always undisturbed at this hour, and now it stood ajar. The black slit in the frame like an eye half-lidded in sleep. Or watching. I narrowed my eyes. The rain pricking against my skin, heart beginning to thud. Still, I told myself again, maybe someone from the store had come in early. Maybe they forgot to lock up. But when I walked around front to check, the truth settled like lead in my stomach. The storefront was still dark, closed, empty. That door should not have been open. The rain trailed down my face and neck like nervous fingers as I stood there, eyes flicking between the darkened storefront and the gaping back door. Every instinct whispered for me to leave it alone, but boredom and a touch of recklessness got the better of me. Maybe I just wanted to be sure. Maybe I was chasing a reason to feel awake. I walked back to the rear entrance and stepped into the narrow space beyond the door. What looked like a small closet or storage vestibule. I didn't go further, just stood there, one foot inside, one out, hands open in plain sight. I wasn't trying to trespass, I just needed to know I wasn't crazy. That's when I heard it. Movement. Someone was inside the store, shuffling drawers, opening and slamming, objects clattering to the ground. It didn't sound like someone preparing to open shop. It sounded like chaos, like desperation. "Hey, everything okay in there?" I called out, trying to inject some steadiness into my voice. Instant silence. The sound stopped like someone had hit a switch. No drawers, no movement, just the rain behind me and my breath catching in my throat. A chill danced down my spine as I took a single step back, retreating into the rain. My heart raced. I turned and rushed back toward the safety of my store, mind screaming now. That door, I glanced back. The handle was gone. Not just missing, gripped out. All that remained was a ragged hole where it once was. And the wedge holding the door open wasn't a rock or a stopper. It was the broken handle itself. I didn't stop running until I was behind my locked doors again. Every bolt sealed, every blind drawn. Then I called 911, then my manager, and then I waited as the phone call ended. The storm outside raged louder, but inside the air was suffocating with dread. I paced a few steps, then pressed my ear against the shared wall between our store's thin drywall and silence, separating me from whoever was inside that space. Then came the sounds: rushed footsteps, clattering metal. Something heavy knocked over and then dragged. The intruder knew the police were coming, and now he was moving fast, desperate, maybe even frantic. My heart thudded in my throat as I imagined. The wall crumbling, the man suddenly breaking through, armed with who knows what. My fingers twitched with the thought of grabbing something, anything to defend myself. But there was nothing, just candy bars, scratch tickets, and a till that barely held. Enough to tempt anyone. The noise intensified, a chaos of motion, as if the man was destroying more than he was stealing. Rage, perhaps, or fear. Then sirens, faint at first, then sharp. Red and blue flashes danced across the windows like salvation made visible. I ducked beneath the counter and stayed there, listening. Footsteps fast, retreating. The clamor of the back door being thrown open, then shouting, not angry, commanding law enforcement. More footsteps, more chaos. Then quiet. Cautiously I peeked out and made my way to the back door. The scene beyond was soaked and slick with light. Officers stood over a man on the ground, hands cuffed, soaked to the bone, panting like a wild animal. His face was unreadable, expression stretched somewhere between exhaustion and defiance. I stepped out into the rain and exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. The officers questioned me gently, professionally, like they already knew I was just a witness, a thin thread that had nearly been snipped. I told them everything about the odd silence, the car with no driver, the broken door handle that wasn't supposed to be there. They nodded, exchanged looks, and told me what they found. The man had been carrying a pillowcase stuffed with stolen merchandise. Nearly $6,000 worth electronics, jewelry, even boxed perfumes from the shop 2 doors down. Tucked into his coat was a firearm, empty but very real. And worse, he had tools, real ones. Heavy-duty lockpicks, screwdrivers, something that looked like a crowbar filed down to fit between latches. This wasn't a random smash and grab, this was a plan. He hadn't just broken into one store, he'd hit another along the strip, quietly, methodically. And though it was never confirmed, one detail lingered, like a shadow, deep, jagged scratches around the back door handle of my own store, old enough to have gone unnoticed, recent enough to chill me. Had he tried my door before? Had he stood there weighing the risk, seeing the lights on, knowing I was inside? I'll never know. But standing there in the rain, listening to officers exchange clipped phrases over radios, the truth settled on me like the night had never ended. Sometimes danger doesn't knock. Sometimes it listens first, waits for silence, waits for you to think you're alone. That was another true story. But in the world of horror, truth is often stranger than fiction. If you're still watching, you're one of the brave ones. Most don't make it this far. Before you go, check behind you. Not everything that follows you makes a sound. Subscribe to Horror Stories and hit the bell, because the next horror stories drop soon. And remember, the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened. Stay scared. Stay safe. We'll see you in the dark.